Well, MLB All-Star Weekend is around the corner. A ton of events starting this weekend. The coup de grace, though, Tuesday night, the All-Star game itself. So to talk about that tentpole event and all things baseball, we're bringing in the voice of MLB on Fox and recent Sports Emmy winner for personality and play-by-play, Joe Davis. Joe, thanks for hopping on.
Hey, Austin, of course.
So, Midsummer Classic, back in Atlanta for the first time since 2000. So long ago that I was actually in college in Atlanta when it happened last. But Joe, I got to ask you this. Is the All-Star game as relevant in 2025 as it was in 2000?
For me, somebody who's inside baseball like this and lives it every day, I still look at this as an event that is really special. And I tap back into, you're talking about your college days, I tap back into the feeling I had as a kid watching the guys line up on the line. And now they're going to be back in their uniforms, right? Seeing the aesthetic of the different uniforms lined up next to each other. I tap back into whatever kind of feeling that inspired in me as a kid. And I think it's those things for me that make it just as relevant as it's ever been, because it inspires so many of those kind of sentimental feelings in me.
If you were Commissioner Rob Manfred, what is a tweak to the game you might add to market it to kind of the newer TikTok generation?
They're on this. They're talking about this. Anything they can do to further promote starting pitching, length of starts. There are a lot of ideas out there as far as shortening rosters, limiting how many pitchers you can have on the roster, incentives for getting deeper into the games for the starters. Because again, I go back to being a kid watching baseball. And one of the things that would get you excited would be to see the starting pitching matchup, to know that you were going to watch John Smoltz against Kerry Wood or something like that. To be able to have that again, and not that we don't have that, but to know that you're going to have a starting pitching matchup that's going to drive the game and that those guys are going to have the ball for the majority of the game. Anything we can do to promote that, because that promotes the characters, that promotes the stars in the game, as opposed to some of the more anonymous relievers you get coming in after them.
Joe, I think casual sports fans, they know Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, even, Vlad Jr., Freddie Freeman, Manny Machado. But when we turn on the All-Star game Tuesday night on Fox, who are some of the All-Stars that casual sports fans need to watch, maybe for the first time?
Jacob Wilson, who's going to start at short for the American League. It was a big surprise that he won that, winning over Bobby Witt Jr., who'd be another guy that you're going to want to watch when he comes into the game. But Wilson, former big leaguers kid, Jack Wilson's son. He's unique in this day and age that he's a bat-to-ball, aggressive, high-average guy. So a different type of hitter than we're used to seeing these days. I'm lucky that I get to watch, like you mentioned, Shohei Ohtani, get to watch him every day doing the Dodgers, but I also get to see Will Smith, who I don't think enough people are talking about as the Dodger catcher, leading the National League in average, leading the National League in OPS, and playing catcher. So I think people know that Will Smith is good. I don't know if people know that this guy should be talked about as an MVP candidate, given what he's doing, no matter where he plays, amplified by the fact that he's doing it as a catcher.
I will say Will Smith wrecked my fantasy team last year. Just anytime I was coming up against him, I hated it.
That's funny.
But Joe, if you're creating a national marketing campaign for MLB, like an ad to run during the Oscars or something, another major tentpole on TV, what are the faces of the MLB effort?
Like specific players?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to think too hard on it. Like you'd be complicating it to go anywhere past Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. And there's something about physically the two biggest stars in the sport also being figuratively the two biggest stars in the sport. I mean, these guys are like superhero type guys. And so you don't have to work very hard to sell them. Their size and their spectacular ability kind of sells itself. So I think you put those two guys front and center. And then there's so many guys these last few years in this era of more base running, more stolen bases, a little more action, that are exciting to watch, from Ellie De La Cruz to Corbin Carroll to Bobby Witt Jr. to Pete Crow Armstrong for the Cubs this year, that are, I think, easy to feature as well. They might not have that name power or that physical presence that Ohtani and Judge do, but are really exciting players that I think are easy sells too.
Yeah, show me more of that O'Neill Cruz throw from center field at 105 miles an hour. That was some nasty stuff coming in there.
I can do that too.
Oh, I want to see that, Molly. We're going to have that next, the throwing competition on the Sports Media Podcast.
I would beat you. I will say that.
Joe, what do you say to people out there that maybe say baseball's become too regional, too tribal maybe?
I think tribal is a good thing. I think feeling like your baseball team and that it's there every day, feeling like that's part of your life, I think there's something regional and tribal about that idea. But I would also say, like, while that's the only way for a 162 game season, I think in this day and age to really exist, I do think that it's inarguable that that regional, that local game, if you want to call it that for the regular season, becomes global when we get into October, especially with these big stars. Like last year, those two biggest stars we're talking about, Molly, being on the World Series stage, that's not local anymore. Shohei Ohtani is a global celebrity. Aaron Judge, maybe not quite as global as Ohtani, but we're talking big-time stars where when you get guys like that into October, I think a game that, is regional just inherently and that it's an everyday thing and the entire country is not going to be watching every day, but locally you are. I think it does morph into that when you get into the big games, especially when the big stars are in them in October.
I mean, Joe, you're talking to a Yankees fan here, so to me, Aaron Judge is global. But
There, I wouldn't argue it.
Joe, what's the toughest part about transitioning from calling Dodgers games on Spectrum Sportsnet to a national role with Fox now?
It's not as much like people would think, oh, how do you play it down the middle or how do you get excited for the other team? That part's not difficult for me. It just kind of happens. It's the more difficult thing is in the prep and organizing the thoughts and the information in my head because you have to present it differently. The way I'm presenting the Dodgers to the Dodger audience when it's day to day, much more granular. People care about what, James Outman, how he's feeling as a dad. He has a 10-month-old at home. And I'm going to tell him about that. I have to kind of relearn everything that I know and reframe everything that I know to present these guys to a national audience. So it's more of a framing challenge than it is playing it down the middle or being unbiased.
All right, Joe, time for some quick hitters, the backstretch here. What's your favorite John Smoltz moment?
I don't know if I have one moment in particular. It's more just his uncanny ability to predict something and then have it happen. I think that's what we love from all the best analysts, right? Like their ability to teach us, but then their ability to stun us. I have it on football too with Greg Olson. He'll say stuff is going to happen, and then it happens. And it's not like he gets lucky once. I mean, this happens once a series when we get into the postseason where John says something that is very specific, and that specific thing happens. So there's not one of those, just that ability, I think, Austin, would be what's my favorite thing about working with John.
All right, back to the Dodgers. What's something most fans don't know about Shohei Ohtani?
Talked about it yesterday, so some of them may know now, but he travels his own bed. He's obsessive about his sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Guy gets like 10 to 13 hours a night. It may be coming down because he has a new baby. I don't know if he's quite sleeping as much at home. But yeah, he'll do everything he can to optimize that sleep.
It's a bed sponsorship right there. We're talking to do the Tempur-Pedics out there if you're listening.
Let's go.
All right, I am also accepting Tempur-Pedic sponsorships, by the way.
Right? You would travel your own bed, right? Just got to give you one.
Heck yeah.
Oh, if I could, for sure.
Uh-huh.
All right, what's a better format for international competition, the World Baseball Classic or the Olympics?
I'm excited that the Olympics are going to get back into baseball. It's hard, though, after the WBC we had the last time, to argue that there's any better international format than that. That was so much fun.
That was pretty solid, yeah.
Right? I went into it saying, if I'm being honest, like, this is kind of a drag. This is right before the start of the real season, and I got to go do this. But it was such a thrill. So it was so much fun doing those games. And it started with the players leaning into it and playing with so much passion and treating it like a true championship event. That bled into the crowd, or maybe vice versa. I'm sure it worked both ways. And up in the booth, I felt both those things. The players invigorating it with the celebrations and the passion they're playing with, and the crowds in Miami. Just awesome. So I'm sure the Olympic format's going to be great too. It's just there's a really high bar that the WBC set last time.
Yeah, anything that resembles a Caribbean Series game with that sort of format, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Do you think an in-season tournament would work for Major League Baseball?
That was like a real part of, like, just not for kicks, but
yeah, something like that the NBA has done, that now NASCAR has tried. Can something like that work for baseball?
You know what, Austin, I think is interesting is that it's the best thing about baseball, but it's also the hardest thing about baseball. 162 games is long. And when teams get off to bad starts, that's a really long season where, like, what are you watching for? If you were to split it up somehow, that gives you all the things you love about a pennant race twice. And it gives hope to fan bases newly coming out of the second half. You know, if you were to do some kind of split season. So I think there's ways to play around with that where it could be a really good thing. The obvious drawback is a big drawback, and that is baseball's history is such an important part of the fabric of the game, and you kind of are starting an entirely new era if you do that. So you have to weigh the historical implications, and that's no small thing, with what it might mean in a good way.
All right, outside of Dodger Stadium, of course, your favorite place to call or watch a baseball game?
I'm a sucker for the old places. Dodger Stadium's the third oldest place. I'll go with the two oldest in Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. I grew up going to games at Wrigley Field, grew up in Michigan as a Cubs fan, driving around the lake and going there. And especially since those places have been restored and redone so beautifully where you don't feel like you're walking into a place that's old in a bad way. It's just rich, old. Man, I love doing games in those two places.
Who is the most notable celebrity you've had in a booth?
I'm going to go way off the grid on this.
Let's go.
And it's not going to be a name that is like A-list celebrity, but I'm a huge foodie. My favorite restaurant in LA is called Mother Wolf. The chef there is Evan Funke, and he's blown up. Evan's got places in Miami, Chicago, and obviously LA is where he all started. So big-time chef for a big-time foodie. I've become friendly with him recently, and he was in the booth. The reason I bring this up, he was in the booth our last home game. I told him, like, hey, dude, I hang out with Ohtani every day, and I'm starstruck when I see you. And Chef Evan says, stop it, I make spaghetti. But that was pretty cool. Maybe not the A-list Hollywood celebrity you're thinking of, but for a food guy, hard to beat that.
Honestly, great answer.
Thanks, Molly.
I like that. All right, Joe, we'll get you out of here on this. What is something you still want to do as a play-by-play announcer, whether that's baseball or football? Or another sport. Maybe it's another sport.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you a couple answers. A Game 7. Haven't had a World Series Game 7. I grew up dreaming of doing the World Series, but if you would ask me what is the one game, if I had to answer one game, it'd be a World Series Game 7. So that. And then I would love to, within the realm that I'm in, sports and TV, and see where else I can push. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I love having deep conversations, tapping into guys, kind of what makes them tick and their stories. And I don't know exactly how that would manifest, but I'm always trying to think about how could I, continue to push a little bit more and give a little bit more.
Well, you can catch him all season on MLB on Fox, also calling Dodgers games on Spectrum Sportsnet. The All-Star game is Tuesday night, Joe. We're going to watch you calling the action on Fox. Appreciate you coming on the SBJ Sports Media Podcast.
Great to talk to you, Austin and Molly. Thanks for having me.